All right, I think we are going to get started. We have a lot of material to cover today. So welcome, everyone. I know it is a snowy, cold day here in Chicago, but I'm super excited to be sharing our first episode of this season of 2023, which is Leading the Challenger Sale. Our topic today is leading and winning during a sideways economy. I'm Andy Harris. I am your host and the CEO of Challenger. And not only do I have one special guest, but I have two special guests with me today. Kate Ducharme, who is our Senior Director of Key Accounts at Challenger, and Tim Coker, who is our Director of Business Development for West Monroe Partners. I will let them both introduce themselves. So Kate, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andy, and it's a pleasure to be here. Really excited to have the conversation today. As Andy mentioned, I'm Senior Director of Key Accounts. I manage a handful of our key accounts here at Challenger. I've been helping companies implement Challenger for close to a decade now, and been in the sales performance space for about 17 years. So really excited to walk through not only some of our research, which might be familiar to many of you, but what we're most excited about is hearing from Tim with his experience at West Monroe and the partnership that we have with him. So really excited to introduce someone that I've had the pleasure of working with for the past year. So Tim, I'll pass it over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Kate. Pleasure being here with you both. So hello, everyone. I'm Tim Coker. A little background on me. I've been in sales and sales leadership for about 30 years, which is hard to believe. Time flies. Most of that in professional services, consulting, and digital technologies. And I can say something that many people can't say, and I know that makes me fortunate, and that's that I love what I do, and I have that entire time. So excited about our conversation today. I'm proud to lead the sales function here at West Monroe. I'm on a revenue growth team reporting to our Chief Revenue Officer, and it is an exciting time here at West Monroe. Just a bit about us. We are a digital services firm comprised of thinkers and makers. So we bring a unique combination of full service digital consultancy, think strategists, organizational change management, human capital, process engineers, and a deep vertical industry expertise. So getting to the why and how of doing digital transformations for our clients. And we combine that with a world-class build organization. So digital product engineering. We build transformational products for our clients in both custom application and platform configuration and deployment. Our clients tell us that's a truly differentiated approach, and it's kind of that magic combination of elements that we call being digital as opposed to doing digital on a project here or there. We're ferociously focused on business outcomes, and this is the approach that we use to do it. On a personal note, Kate is an outstanding account director, and it's been my pleasure working with you and your team on bringing Challenger to West Monroe. And Andy, I'll be nice and say we've known each other for more than 15 years. Back when you were a leader at Emerging Solutions here in Chicago, and I was at Whitman Hart at the time. I've been a huge fan since, and it's been my pleasure tracking your career success. And I'll just say Challenger is really lucky to have you at the helm. So I think I'll pass it back to you to take us to the next section.
Yes, and I just want to say I love your mantra of don't do digital, be digital. I think that is such an important distinction. So thank you for sharing. And it's been incredible for me to watch the West Monroe journey as well, being here in Chicago Tech. So before we jump into lots of good advice from both Kate and Tim, I do want to just kind of do the state of the state, right? So, obviously we know based on our research and what we're hearing, sellers are facing a more difficult environment than ever. We know that customers are 57% through the buying process before they even contact a supplier, which means they're doing a lot of research online, on the web, trying to figure out different ways to basically not talk to a sales rep. There's more stakeholders than ever involved in that purchase. So, we are seeing an average of 6 to 11 stakeholders in most complex purchase decisions, which obviously includes a lot around procurement and the CFO. So these are all new skills that our sellers need to adapt to. And essentially, a lot of the customer's time is spent without you, 83%. So they really are spending a lot of time meeting with internally and doing research, but not really talking to sales reps. So a lot of these decisions, when they do finally call a sales rep, is all around, thinking about I just need price. So, I'd love to hear from you all. I mean, this is based on our research, but what are you guys seeing in the market? What are you seeing as far as when buyers do engage you? What are some things that you're doing to sort of prevent, this only talking about price. So anything you guys want to put in the chat around that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and Andy, I can just chime in just from commercial perspective. Obviously, the stakeholders has been a huge challenge, just the increasing number. And I can just speak to one of the largest deals I worked on. There was essentially a steering committee of 38 people who were making the decision. And that doesn't even include the 20 or so interviews that I did on the front end to understand the client's status quo. So that's 60 people. Right. And I'm imagining most sellers that are on the line today, you don't just have one account, right? You've got multiple accounts and opportunities. So you add that number and it becomes a really large number. And we know with larger groups, getting consensus is much more challenging. I'll also speak to, a recent conversation I had with a client, and I think Tim will speak to some of this when we talk about the broader economic challenge we're facing. But, hearing from clients that say there's no certainty, we have no budget, all of our budgets are slashed. We're operating at bare minimum. We have less people. We've just done layoffs. But oh, by the way, can you help us get funding for this? Right? It's a really hard place to be. And that's what our job is, right? It's our responsibility to help clients in those situations. The last kind of big I've seen is, we used to have, multi-year commitments, 2-year, 3-year, multi-year. That seems to be not an option anymore, right? We're hardly able to get someone to commit to 1 year. And that's a very hard challenge, especially in most businesses. So love to hear from Tim. I know we're seeing a lot of great comments coming through the chat. Tim, what are you seeing for your business development team?
Yeah, my take here is just, +1 to all these statistics, and, probably the bars are getting longer. But particularly an interesting point I'll add is in some of the highly regulated industries that we serve, there are even larger groups of decision makers, and the key decision makers don't even understand in their own organization another raft of decision makers that they have to go get approvals from now, particularly in the economics that we'll talk about in a minute. So you just can't do enough due diligence on the players and identifying the right ones. Agreed.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. And I mean, we are seeing in the chat a lot of good, I guess not good, but bad problems people are having. But I do think the 2 questions: when can we get a demo, and how much does it cost? It seems to be the only time they want to interact with the salesperson. So I think that is, Mike, I think that is very real. So thank you. And then I did see a lot around supply chain, and just, to your point, Tim, about all the different buying stakeholders, the different geographies, trying to just, cut across all these lines. And we'll talk about, mobilizers later on in the episode, but I do think that is certainly something people are struggling with. And then on top of it, we have all these scary headlines, though. There are some good ones coming out just recently, and I'll let Tim talk about the one from Goldman today. But I do think there is a lot around layoffs. There's a lot of fear around, what is the economy? Is it more likely to be a recession? Are we in recession? Is a recession coming? And I feel like every day there's a new statistic around it. But we are seeing, certainly layoffs. Consumer confidence is down. So, we definitely are feeling that. But I will let Tim talk about the Goldman number that we did see today.
Sure. Yes. Thanks, Andy. So that's that 25% number, which Goldman Sachs came out yesterday, now calling only 25% chance that we'll enter a formal recession. So what I wish I had to share was clarity, but as Andy just said, there are so many mixed signals. Just Tuesday, the retail numbers came out, and there was a bounce in retail in January, which no one expected. So people are spending more. It's really kind of all over the board. Some indicators are up, others are down. For West Monroe, I would say we're seeing a mixed bag as well. We see some seasonality to it, and we definitely see sector sensitivity to it. So in some of our vertical markets we serve, such as healthcare and some of the subsectors in healthcare, as well as energy and utilities, those units are doing very well right now. We had one of our strongest sales month on record in January. Strong spend on key projects and digital transformations. Other sectors like high tech and software and financial services, as you see in the headlines there, to a certain degree, mergers and acquisitions, have some real headwinds right now, as you can see in the headlines. But even there, we're seeing that clients are doing smart spending on the high impact initiatives that are going to give them an edge coming out of this. So we're cautiously optimistic, especially the back half of the year. We're seeing some activities and early conversations picking up. So a mixed bag, but I think that presents opportunities to sellers, frankly. One thing is certain, I would say you do not want to be out there right now selling in what I'll call a traditional sense and respond model. We want to buy this. How much is it? Give me the demo, as you said, Andy. You want a solid methodology or framework that really puts you at a distinct advantage. So that, hence our topic today, I think.
Yes, yes. So that kind of leads me into our next slide. It is not all doom and gloom, right? Some good news around this, right? And to your point, Tim, like you certainly want to think about your methodology and think about making sure that you're coaching your teams and your sellers have the right skills. So a few things, like we've been here before. So Challenger was created during the recession. I actually read it for the first time in 2010 when I was heading up our sales, and we were actually trying to figure out how to sell better in a recession. So we've been there before. We know how to overcome it. We have that data and research. We also know, to Tim's point, it's not what you sell, but it's how you sell it. And I know Kate will jump in and give us some really, good ideas around how you sell it. And, high performers, although, there is some intrinsic, motivation there, you can train people to be high performers, even in a tough economy. So the good news is that we know how to tackle this, and we have the tools and the skills to go ahead and do this. So, like I said, this topic is really around how do you drive growth in a sideways economy. So really thinking about growth. And we know that, one big word comes to mind when we think about this. And that, and that word is really focus. So really thinking about, focusing on the right fits, the right opportunities. So I'm going to let Kate talk a little bit about, how we talk about focus here at Challenger.
Yeah, so as we think first, it's really about thinking about the right opportunities. So oftentimes, one of the kind of responsibilities when you're managing an account list or territory is to identify which are the opportunities that we should actually be spending our time on. And there are kind of easy ways to do that, and there are harder ways to do that. You can progress forward. And the easy way is let's just call on all opportunities that exist. Let's look at the big ones. Let's look at the big logos. And let's really kind of build our pipeline by calling on what's out there. Oftentimes it's responding to already established demand. And to Tim's point, usually that's the give me the demo. I think I know what I want. Those are not going to lead to the high quality deals, premium solutions, and your differentiation. What does really lead to higher quality deals and the type of business most businesses are looking for is really looking for those opportunities that we are most likely to win. But how do we do that? How we think we do that is really to understand which are those accounts that have a status quo problem, right? There's something at risk in their business. There's something that they may not be aware of. They may be aware of, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. And really understand, is there a status quo that gives us an opportunity to reframe their thinking, right? That gives us an opportunity to add value. Doing a demo is not adding value. Everyone can do a demo. And the other point that we'll talk a lot more about later in the conversation today is how do we actually find individuals within the customer organization who are going to actually go to bat for us, right? Who are going to help us understand the landscape for change, actually drive that change either with us or on our behalf. We call those individuals mobilizers. That's a lot of hard work, right? Trying to know enough about our accounts to understand their status quo and recognize what our hypothesis could be to break that status quo, and then find the right person to have that conversation. So while that is hard work, that does pay off because that enables us to actually focus on less opportunities that have higher potential. We talk a lot about this concept called the wedge versus the nail. If you think about an image of a wedge, right, you're putting a lot of opportunities into the pipeline, you're spending a lot of time in all different places, customers are opting out. And that's what poor performers tend to do. High performers, it's more of a nail, right? I'm going to really spend my time qualifying so I can focus on those opportunities that I'm most likely to win. On the next page, we'll talk a little bit more about what do we do? What does status quo mean? And what are the various kind of types of status quo environments that are going to help educate us on how we should approach them, right? So you've got customers that they are confident that they are actually dealing with the issue themselves, right? They know the problem, they think they know how to fix it. That's kind of one type of scenario. Another scenarios where the customer says, I've got a problem, but it's just the cost of doing business. This is just what happens. I'm not willing to try and solve this, or it's not worth solving. And then the last scenario, which is the most rare scenario, which is they're not even aware they have a problem, and so therefore they don't actually think it's something that needs to be solved. So when we think about, your accounts and your opportunities, the first thing we want to figure out is which one of these scenarios does my customer fit in, and how do I actually now approach them in this way where I can help them either highlight the problem or challenge that they're facing, and or perhaps even expose them to risk with the solution that they're already going with. So these are just some ways to think better about the accounts, not just how big are they, how many employees do they have, what's their revenue, right? Really more around, do I understand their business? What are the challenges that they're facing? And have they figured everything out? Because more likely than not, they haven't, which means it gives us an opportunity to teach and an opportunity to add value. So how do we do this, right? If you think about once we understand their status quo, and by the way, that takes a lot of time and effort to truly get there. There's a lot of research we can do on the front end. Part of understanding their status quo is actually getting validation from having the conversations with them. But first, it's understanding what they're doing today, why we think they're doing that, right? So there's actions and behaviors that we can see, but what's really behind it? And then what are they missing? What don't they realize about the approach that they're having? So this is just a very simple framework to really start thinking about how do I build a reframe and get them to start thinking differently about how they're operating. And then a quick checkpoint that we like to use when we're building these types of narratives is what we're saying to them. Is it surprising? Is it something that's new to them, something they haven't heard before? Is it sizable enough? Is it a large enough problem that they're worth putting time and effort towards? And is it solvable by us, right? Does it lead back to differentiated solutions that we can provide? And if we can do this for every single one of our accounts and opportunities, we're going to be much more likely to be successful. And again, this takes understanding the customer's business. And all of this is about them, right? None of this is about us, aside from we've got to make sure it leads back to something we're differentiated in. But everything else is, what are they doing today? What's at risk? What are they missing? And ultimately, how can we help?
Yeah, just a couple quick examples, Kate, on these points. If you go back to the three scenarios, the first one is familiar, they're familiar, but they think they know how to fix it. That's definitely something we come up against, in digital transformations and consulting. You can't unlock that without a mobilizer that you talked about. Most often in our business, this looks like a client taking a narrow view of a problem or a solution. So they're seeing it as a tech problem or a process problem or a people problem. And maybe they think they can solve one of those pieces. But what we try to do is reframe and have them zoom out to see, to truly be digital, as we say, it's kind of applying all the above. And it doesn't mean you have to do all the above, but you need to at least see how the puzzle pieces fit together and at least consider those interdependencies to get the work done if you're going to reap the reward of the effort. So that's kind of how we frame that one. The second scenario, familiar with the problem, but don't think it's important enough to fix. That's, I think, where the challenger concept of commercial teaching can help. Sometimes we need to coach the client on the gains that they can get. So I may think my quote to cash process is broken, but everyone's is broken. That's just cost of doing business, right? But if you engage and talk about the many times you've helped other clients with that problem and you've dropped 20% gross margin to the bottom line on higher net sales, we may be quickly becoming collaborators, in that process. So, and, the way that would look a little bit in the, the next slide, kind of the format of this problem statement, the customer is currently quoting products from spreadsheets. They do it because it's always worked. They don't have a centralized automated configuration and pricing engine. Why they don't realize about that approach is that they're losing out on a 20% gross margin lift on higher net sales that would be delivered in half the time. And so if you can reframe it, perhaps set up some executive peer-to-peer conversations to do reference calls, it completely changes the conversation.
Yeah, Tim, love those examples. And I think for those of you on the line today, I'm sure you can start thinking about hypotheses if you haven't already around what is it, what is your customer's status quo? What is it that they're missing? Because the unique advantage that every salesperson or business development individual has is that you likely work with tens, if not hundreds, of other customers that look similar to them, right? Every client runs their own business and they have a lot that they're working on internally within their own business. And what they value is someone coming in and saying, hey, I know you've been doing it this way for 15, 20 years, 5 years. The world around us has shifted. What we're seeing other organizations do is something that looks a little bit different. Would you be open to having that conversation? Most would say yes to that. If they don't, actually, that's an indicator that they might not be the right type of client to call on, and that gets back to qualification. So this all kind of fits together. I'll just share very high level with this, a very common reframe for us at Challenger. Many folks have read the Challenger sale book, and the kind of idea of, well, let's get everyone to read the book. Maybe we'll do some training, and then we're going to have a Challenger organization, right? And it's not that simple. A lot of what you'll hear us talk about today is insight. How are we building that insight capability? I like to call it an insight engine. Sales training doesn't solve for that, right? So really having that more holistic perspective. And this is something that every seller can do, the organization can support you with, but it all starts with, what is our customer status quo? What are they missing, whether it's known or unknown? And how do we get them to start thinking a little bit differently?
Yeah.
So we've made reference to Mobilizer quite a bit, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this research. It's similar to the research that we did to better understand the types of sales profiles that existed. We really wanted to understand, what does the customer stakeholder profile look like, and what types of customers are we calling on? Because as was mentioned actually in the chat, we're oftentimes told to go find that one coach or that advocate or that individual who's going to do all the work for you. And in reality, and we actually did a study on it and looked at 700 different stakeholders, only one person of 700 met all the criteria that we're actually going out there telling salespeople to look for. So if we can't find that unicorn, what do we find? There are 7. We're going to summarize it into 3 different categories. There's 3 types of customer stakeholders. You have mobilizers. Those are the stakeholders. Might be harder to get meetings with them. They might be a little bit hesitant, but ultimately they're the ones who are open to driving change. So if we can attach an idea to them, they're going to be the ones that are going to help fight with us and on our behalf. Talkers, just like they sound, they do a lot of talking. They give us a lot of information. They help us navigate. They tell us who the players are. They give us information about what they're doing, but they talk and don't act. These are the conversations that you think are going to progress forward, right? Seller tells the manager, yep, this deal is going to close in the next 2 months. 2, 3, 4 months pass and nothing's happened, right? Because they're not taking action. And then blocker is pretty self-explanatory, pro status quo, anti-change. And so, of course, and this is probably not surprising, but most core performers call on talkers. It's a lot easier to get a meeting with them. Those meetings are fun. They're enjoyable, right? They're happy. Mobilizers, high performers will call on mobilizers, right? It might be harder to get the meeting, but once we get that meeting, once we start having those conversations, they're going to have not only the influence, but the interest to try and drive change on our behalf. So as we mentioned earlier on qualification, not only is it qualification of opportunities and accounts, but it's qualification of the individuals that we're calling on within those accounts. And if we can try and find more mobilizers and help identify those mobilizers, it'll enable us to be more successful.
Yeah, I would add that against the backdrop of the economy that we talked about, it's even more important, to find the mobilizers. These are the people that drive the internal change management, and there's such reticence to change right now. If you don't have that change agent, you just have much less chance of moving, a deal forward. I'd go as far as to say, if you haven't identified and built some rapport with the mobilizer, you should think seriously about maybe passing on the opportunity. I mean, it's gotten that, pronounced, I think. Got a painful story of a loss from last year on this. Actually, we had many factors in our favor on a big pursuit, 7-figure pursuit, just crushed it all the way through, good signals. But at the end of the day, we were not with the mobilizer. We had a talker that was acting like a mobilizer. So it's kind of like a sheep in wolf's clothing, I guess, to reverse the phrase. But then it was too late. The cycle dragged on, and it just kind of died under its own weight because the person was happy to engage, as Kate said, give us all the information, but they did not have the juice to drive the change internally. So sometimes you're in those situations and you can't prevent it. And we knew we were there. We couldn't burst out of it in that case, but it just makes you get really choosy about a nail-shaped funnel versus the wedge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry,
I saw in the chat, Patty said, we call those people in the middle group, the talkers, we call them Seymours, right? And they're always asking for more charts and facts. And I love that. That's so true.
Yeah, and those are the folks that are saying, give me the demo. That is an indication that they are likely a talker, because mobilizers don't want a demo. Not
And
until
yeah,
we
and they don't want
built
8 demos, like, oh, now can you demo it to this group, and now can you demo it to that group, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Tim, you bring up a really good point, and essentially the example you just shared is one we hear all too often, and it comes down to time spent, right? If you are in a sales role, you have a limited amount of time, and how you spend that time is so important. And if you're spending a lot of time with the wrong people, i.e. talkers, or a lot of time with the wrong accounts, the accounts that are not open to driving change, we haven't, really gotten them to break down their status quo, that time could have been spent elsewhere. There's typically not a capacity. In some industries, there's some capacity elements in terms of the number of customers they can call on. But in most cases, this is all about prioritization of time. And are we spending our time with the right people? And to Tim's point, if we're not, let's say no. And it's a hard thing for a salesperson to say no to an account, to an opportunity, to a person. Let's not take the call with someone who's going to ultimately be a waste of time.
That first no from the seller to the buyer is many times the gateway to be introduced to the challenger, right? If you're willing to walk away, that's when things get interesting, right? It's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'm going to move us along a little bit. Go ahead on this one, Kate.
Yeah, so this is actually, and everyone's going to get this material and follow up. This is just a very quick checklist to really have, whether you're a leader, to take back to your sales team, if you're a salesperson individually, use this checklist to think about the opportunities, the accounts that you're working on. Sit down with your manager, and if we don't have answers to these questions, we shouldn't be having that conversation. We'll talk about some of them a little bit later in the conversation today, but use this as a checkpoint and make sure that these are questions that we can answer before we actually go in and have the conversation.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about prioritizing the right opportunity. Once again, this is really around focus. We have 3 key areas. So the second one is, invest in your sales team for a stronger sales experience. And it was really interesting, right around Q3 when, people kept saying, well, we're not sure if we want to invest in sales training, we're not sure what's going on with the economy. And we kept saying, but yeah, you need us more than ever, right? And this is really true because, as we went back to those earlier slides, what we know is that people are still successful, even in a recession, even a downturn economy, even in a pandemic, but they have to have the right skills and the right coaching. So we're going to jump into that topic. So this is our topic number 2, is to just make sure you invest in those skills. So, really understanding, what seller skills do buyers, value most. We talked a lot about that unique insight, right? They help us with a unique insight. They help us come to a decision. They understand who the different stakeholders are. So once again, understanding who those mobilizers are, those talkers, those blockers. They help build support across the organization. So one of the things that we know is so important in the sales experience is really helping. We want to make sure that our buyers are really building that support, building that groundswell across their organization. And lastly, which is something we've worked so hard on Challenger this year, just personally, like around packaging and pricing, make it easy. We've got to make it easier for our purchase, for people to purchase our products, our services. I actually saw someone in the chat saying, we're really trying to simplify a lot of our processes so that people can, because we do need to get to procurement, and the faster we can sort of get to procurement and get those, those conversations going, the better. So Kate, Tim, I don't know if, what you're seeing as far as like your coaching and.
Yeah, I can jump in first. Tim, go ahead.
No, go please.
Yeah, I was going to say, from a seller perspective, this has almost become the table stakes, right? If we are not doing these things, then the customer should not give us time. Customers today have much less time to work with. And when they think about potentially having a conversation with a supplier, it's 17% of their time. If they're talking to 3 suppliers, that makes that number much smaller. So if we are not delivering value through the conversations we're having, why should they talk to us in the first place, right? And that's where we lose access. So I see this as table stakes. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's table stakes if you do in fact want to differentiate. If we don't do these things, that's when the customer says, give me the demo, how much does it cost?
Right. I just, from West Monroe's perspective on this, I think it's been in our DNA forever, coming from the consulting world we came from, but we definitely invest in bringing the unique perspective, the industry perspective, what are the outcomes, and help our clients sometimes multi-year, make those decision points, even budgeting decision points in certain cases. And there's one other stat I track when we talked about the economy. There's another index I track that's called the ACSI, American Customer Satisfaction Index. basically it's how happy are people dealing with companies, and they measure 500 companies over 10 sectors. And it's now at its lowest level in 17 years. So if you do some of the things that Kate just talked about against a backdrop of disappointment and buyers that have less time than they've ever had, you can really stand out, is the point. So there's an opportunity in all this.
Yeah, and Tim, actually, the next slide is exactly the reason why that number is down, right? When we went out and asked sellers or asked customers, what is it that that the suppliers that you're interacting with are doing to influence the decisions that you're making? Yes, there's a few really small words there that kind of are what we're looking for, but the overwhelming words that we're seeing here are nothing. And then you see product and price. And I just want to reference, Patty made a comment in the chat, customers have less time and need to see more value immediately, right? And I think that's an important differentiation. Yes, they need more value, but they want to see value right away. So if we're having a first interaction with someone, don't spend 20 minutes talking about the weather, right? We've got to show them that we understand their world, assert some, interest in their business, show our credibility, and add value right away, or else we will lose that next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. If we go to the next slide, right, this is, once again, when our buyers need us the most, we're really failing them as an industry, right? Like, are they, if you look at those top orange bars, that is essentially what we're expecting our salespeople to do. And I think it's really disappointing when, a buyer is like, okay, I really need you to help me, build stakeholder analysis around this, or help me, figure out how to engage appropriately. And you can see that we're just, struggling with those areas. And then, getting back to your conversation or your comment, Kate, around table stakes, right? I mean, we think, once again, we know that the sales experience drives that. We know that company and brand impact, product and service delivery, value to price ratio, those are all table stakes. People expect that. What they really differentiates us and that competitive advantage is really, on that sales experience. So Tim and Kate, I'd love to turn it over to you. I mean, Tim, how are you really driving that differentiated sales experience with your team?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Coming early to the table with insights and commercial teaching, coaching about what best-in-class peers are doing, the benefits that they're seeing from the transformations that we're helping them with. So you're coming with a point of view that you're seeking to understand how they're doing things, but you understand their business already. You have experts in their industry, and furthermore, what the top quartile is doing better and differently, and you can help paint a picture of the bridge and the kind of the size of the prize to get there, right? The reason for taking the action. So we do that more and more effectively. In the years that I've been here, it's always been a strength, but it's really turning to be central. Another thing is the risk management that you see there. So helping to avoid risks. This is another, value that you can provide through that teaching on the best case scenarios you've helped clients with. Is educating them on pitfalls that they're about to walk into that you've done 100 times, and maybe they've purchased this thing you're selling once. So you have much more perspective. You've got the battle scars. You've seen what customers have, the wins and the losses they've had. So that risk mitigation role can really, I think, up your quality in the minds of the buyers you're working with too.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think many folks have seen this research before. And of course, if there's anything on the left side of this page that an organization doesn't have right, we've got to fix that because that's our ticket to entry. But of course, if we're able to deliver a sales experience that looks and feels more like this than kind of the conventional, traditional sales experience, that is where we're going to see our differentiation. And we hear from customers that they are willing to pay for this, right? They will pay for this, yes, in terms of ultimately buying a premium product. But we actually hear we will pay for you to come in and have this conversation with this broader stakeholder group because they need to hear this. And coming from you with your credibility, that's the goal that we should have. The other thing I love about this research, and this is true whether you're a sales leader or a salesperson, what this says is the majority of the essentially determination of loyalty, which is what we're measuring here, is within your control as a salesperson, as a sales leader. Right? We can't, as a salesperson, we can't change our brand. We can't do anything about product. We can't fix the supply chain issues and all that stuff. What we can do is change how we show up when we're in front of a customer. As a leader, we can help influence that. We can help enable our teams to do that better. So I see this as a really empowering statistic for us, and something that, it's an opportunity. But if we're not taking advantage of this, if we're not actually improving and thinking about how we're improving that sales experience and doing the due diligence to deliver this type of experience, then we will be losing to price.
Yeah, and I think if we go to the next slide, Kate, I think this is such a, important differentiator, right? This is the, typical sales process, right? This is a sales process that is not going to work in a sideways economy or in general, right? And so really, once again, I do think that differentiator is really, thinking about your sales process and how do you tweak it and how do you change it so that it does make more sense and you are doing more research on the front end. So when you do get to meet with that customer, you're prepared and you're ready to go. So Kate, Tim, would love to hear your examples of this.
Sure. I think I'm happy that West Monroe, in my experience, has never been this flat and, maybe this negative picture. With consulting DNA, in addition to the digital products we build, I would switch the size of the bubbles. We're really good at discovery and diligence, and we're consultants, we have that in our DNA, which is still incredibly valuable. But I think you'll see on the next slide the difference between the two. This gets down to that. The first slide was kind of that sense and response selling, right? Tell me what hurts. I'll ask a bunch of questions about it. We'll come up with something and be back in touch and propose on it. This is much more commercial insights. And you're coming with a perspective and engaging with people, hopefully those change agents that we call mobilizers, and it just changes the game completely. All the other competitors kind of become column B, C, and D, and you're having a different conversation in column A. So.
Yeah, and Tim, it's so interesting you bring up, obviously West Monroe and most folks kind of consulting background, and it is more natural to have that more consultative conversation about the customer's business. And I came from consulting before being here, and so that comes more naturally to me. I'm not an expert at it, but most salespeople who have kind of grown up in sales, we're taught to ask all these questions, build rapport, make the customer happy, spend a lot of time with them. And unfortunately, based on also a lot of the comments in the chat, right, customers don't have time for that. And they want to see value much earlier on. And if we spend the entire first conversation asking a lot of questions and then rushing to the end and then all of a sudden saying, oh, do you have time next week to talk again? And they say, well, yeah, send us an email. You know where that goes. Like, there's no conversation. The size of the bubbles itself is also important, right? The previous page, a lot of time on product and solution, right? Let's talk about the features and benefits. Let's tell you about all the great things we can do for you. That's a fun conversation. But if we haven't yet got the customer to recognize that there's a problem worth solving, and that problem is big enough that the change management associated with it is worth kind of investing in, then this is a waste of our time and it's a waste of their time, right? When we think about, the ideal state, kind of where we're spending time doing the right things, no seller loves to do pre-call planning, right? There's probably a subset who do, but it's the hard work that pays off, right? If we better understand their industry and their business and we do our due diligence, and there's so much information out there for us now to go out and do that discovery work, we will show up more credible. If we can show up in that conversation having done that due diligence, then what we're looking to do is confirm the status quo that we already think they have. We shouldn't be going in blind, right? As we've talked about before, we've worked with other companies like them. There's likely a few potential hypotheses that we can bring to the table. Then it's really on us to then confirm that, reframe that status quo, get them to start thinking differently, and actually in the meeting, have the conversation around who else should be involved. Let's talk about timelines. Because if that doesn't happen in the meeting, it's not happening.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the differentiated circle in this to me is that reframe. We're really holding ourselves accountable at West Monroe for that. So, don't get caught in that sense and response selling again, right? What's our commercial insight here? How are we reframing to clarify the outcomes? Have we met all the stakeholders, including a strong mobilizer? It makes you think about pursuits and collaborations with your buyers differently. And I think it's very differentiated for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to call out, there's a quick comment in the chat that says, I call that the elephant in the room. And I love that, because if you think about kind of the traditional type of sales profile, I'll just call it the relationship builder. You want to keep the customer happy. You don't want to rock the boat. So if there's a problem that might be causing them some risk, it might be the elephant in the room. I'm just going to overlook that and keep having this good conversation. You know, a high performing salesperson, a challenger, they're going to call out the elephant in the room. They're going to say, I know you don't want to have this conversation, but it's, you know, we've got to have the conversation now. That's exposing you to risk. There's something you might be missing. Obviously, it's done in a very respectful manner. And it's because the intention is a good intention, right? We're having this conversation with you because it's going to impact your business. And what we care about is your business, not our product.
Yeah, and I think getting back to sort of that reframe of the status quo, obviously this slide is, you know, the pain of the same versus the pain of the change, really explaining, you know, if you stay and you don't do anything, and we also have this, instead of ROI, thinking of COI, right? The cost of inaction versus just the return on the investment. Really, what happens if you do nothing? And I think that is, especially in an economy when people are like, well, I don't know if I should spend money on this, and I don't know what I should do. And really, like, you know, Tim and Kate talked about that reframe is so important of status quo, because you know, that does lead to no decision. It leads to lots of different stakeholders, to lots of like, well, maybe we should go a different direction. Maybe we should do this. Maybe we should just wait. And so, you know, really trying to kind of own that process, you know, around that status quo, and that reframe is really, really critical.
Yeah, and I'll just call on a comment that was made earlier this morning. A question was asked, you know, is the time and effort to change the solutions worth the proposed savings? And why I love that comment, because so often as salespeople, we focus on the future state. Let's talk about all the great things that this solution or service can do. It's going to save you money. It's going to make you more money, whatever that might be. And in a, you know, perhaps a different kind of environment, maybe that's enough. That's not enough today, right? We've got to show them not what the world could look like if you work with us, but what's the world going to look like for you if you don't solve this problem.
Yeah.
That's what's right. The pain that you are going to face or already facing? What's the quantity? How much of that is really going to affect your business? And then, you know, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. Let's tell a story about that pain, right? We've seen other organizations go down this path, and this is what happened to them. Until they see the pain of same being that large, any type of change effort is going to be something that they likely delay, push pause on, or decide to do later.
Yeah, quick real world example of this. Large client and a brand that we would all know, total digital transformation of the customer service function. It started as an assessment, and the ultimate solution may cost millions of dollars and take months or a year to get done. So different shape than maybe originally thought, and that's the pain of change, I guess, the cost, right, to do it. However, if it will drive 20% internal rate of return, which is more than this organization gets by opening a physical store, then you start to feel the pain of the same, or what's the opportunity cost if I don't change, right? So suddenly you're not talking about price as much as investment and return. And I think that's an important kind of fiscal lens on this.
Yeah, and I'll just mention one last data point. And for those of you who are familiar with loss aversion or prospect theory, there's a lot of behavioral research behind this concept. And it's that people are much more likely, actually 2.6 times more likely to take action when presented with the fear of loss versus the anticipation of gain. And again, as salespeople, we tend to historically have been trained to talk about all the anticipation of gain. What can they get? What savings? What improvement can they see? People, and ultimately we are people selling to people. People are going to be much more likely to actually do something, i.e., take action, if we can expose them and show them the fear of what they might lose or what they're already losing.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that painkillers outsell vitamins. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't read the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, around prospect, that really does sum it all up as to how we think about that pain. So speaking of pain, this is one of those like scary stat slides, but one thing we saw in a recent HBR article, it was in the August edition, Bain did a research study, and what they found was that more than half of sales reps would not pay $1 for an hour of their manager's time. And so what we wanted to dig into that deeper, and what we really found was that, a lot of sales managers come from being really high performers as individual contributors. And they're good at, getting into deals and really that deal coaching, but really understanding that skill set, that overall holistic coaching. Before I get off the slide of, not them not paying $1, there was about 10% that were willing to pay $500 an hour for their manager's time. So there are certainly managers doing this well. I know Tim and his team are probably in the $500 range, but it is something to think about. Once again, there are a lot of skills that we're trying to get salespeople to adopt, but really that coaching is so critical. And this, just speaks more to that retention of sales training without coaching. So really, we really want sellers to feel like they're getting the right opportunities, the right time with their managers. But we also know that managers are asked to do a lot, right? We're like, but we need this, time reporting, and we need the quota documents, and we need the territory plans, and we need 800 sales, reports and win-loss data analysis. So, we understand too that, we are putting a lot of pressure on managers to not only do all the things that they need to kind of manage up, but they cannot forget to manage down. So really thinking about that. And, here's some of our data around that, training alone versus training and coaching, 88% more likely to be more productive.
Yeah.
So Tim, I didn't know if anyone wanted to.
Just quick comment on that. We've taken full advantage of the training we received from Challenger, obviously, which includes an emphasis on coaching. We've got a strong organizational change team here, so we understand that discipline. So sustaining change, we know what that looks like. So it's work, it's repetition, it's focus, it's getting in the trenches together. So we've put some programs in place to extend and sustain this, such as weaving Challenger into our CRM in line. So anyone who touches a pursuit starts to understand where you are in that kind of journey. We've got Challenger champions now throughout the organization. We're giving Challenger booster shots in critical meetings and just really trying to keep it to the forefront and then hold each other accountable to this. So you can take any training and it's use it or lose it, right? So I think Kate was she challenged me and others that, you've got to have an eye on the sustainability and coaching on this if you want to get your return from this investment. And we've taken that seriously and it has worked very well. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. And I would just say, Tim and team and the entire West Monroe team, they are so thoughtful in this implementation. This is not just yep, we're doing Challenger, let's do these. It is very thoughtful. It's with a consulting mindset. So I think that's, again, naturally embedded. But we could spend, over an hour just on coaching and coaching alone. And I like the comment in the chat here, coach the reps so they can coach the clients. Coaching comes into play in so many places. It's coaching the sellers on their ability to get to solutions on their own. And then it's coaching your clients, and we call that commercially coaching. And that's how we enable clients to progress in their own buying journey, because it can't just be about me as a salesperson going through my sales process. It's how do I get the customer through their buying journey and coaching them through that. I know I'm just thoughtful on time. I know we've got just about 10 minutes. We do want to try and save some time for Q&A. This next topic is near and dear to my heart. I've been in both new business acquisition roles as well as existing account roles. You're really responsible for driving growth and retention. And one of the key questions we oftentimes get from clients, especially those who are familiar with Challenger, is how does this really play out with existing accounts, right? Are we still challenging their status quo? What does this look like? Shouldn't we also keep them happy? We went out and asked folks to really think about, how do you think you should drive growth? And in most cases, sellers believe that if I just deliver great service, the growth will come. I actually came, in my former life, I worked at Nordstrom, and it was all about customer service. And if you just wow the customer, keep them happy, growth will come. It's slightly different because it's consumer focused, but the overwhelming mindset of those, especially in account management roles, are I'm just going to keep serving. I'm going to keep serving, keep the customer happy, and they will grow. And of course, what we'll show you is whether or not that's actually true when you ask customers.
Yeah, so that leads us to our poll. So our poll is, which rep behavior do you think drives the most growth and accountability? We're seeing customer improvement.
Oh, I didn't think we'd see aggressive selling. We do see a few aggressive selling.
We do, right? I think we got two in aggressive selling. Confidence in the account team, so about 13 people. Oh, and up to 5% in aggressive selling. So yeah. Product success and customer success, obviously still important, right? These are all, once again, I think when we think about table stakes and keeping customers happy. I thought a confidence in account team would be a little bit higher, but. All right.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a few things here, not only retention, growth, but also defense, right? So what is service drive and what are these other elements drive? So yes, service does drive retention. So if we're thinking about we're working with the client, they're spending $1 million with us on a subset of products. Will they spend another $1 million with us next year on those same products if we deliver good service? The answer is yes, right? So let's continue to deliver success. Let's continue to show them the value of what they're buying. Of course, is aggressive selling going to help retention? No. Is aggressive selling going to help with a lot in today's environment? Probably not. But as you can see on the right side of the page, right, customer improvement is also having an influence on retention. But the big question is, does delivering this higher quality service and with the focus on service, does it drive growth, right? And that's what many leaders are looking to do with existing accounts, especially in an environment today where it might be more challenging to bring in new accounts and new logos. And the answer is there's actually no significance, right? Delivering high quality product success and service has zero influence on the ability to grow that account. And this is from the customer's point of view. So what the customer is essentially saying is, yeah, feel free, keep giving me good service and I'll keep working with you, but I'm not going to give you more of my business for that and only that. What I will deliver growth for and what I will introduce you to other business units and be open to new solutions is if I have confidence in this broader team that's supporting me at the supplier organization, but are you actually focused on my business? Are you helping me improve my business? And that is the determining factor. And then, of course, if we're looking to drive retention and growth, then, of course, if we're going to place our bets in one of these areas, it's customer improvement. So, of course, this looks and feels a lot like Challenger, right? Am I providing a unique, valuable perspective? And am I helping them think about the vision for their business? This is all about the customer. And so what this is really showing us is, yes, we've got to make sure that we're delivering the high quality product. We've got to make sure that what we're doing is what we've sold. But if we're looking to not just retain, but also grow, we've got to continue to add value to those customers. We've got to help them with their own business. And I think the last piece here is, what about when we're in competitive environments, right? How do we actually, really protect ourselves? And that's where the defense comes in. So not only does customer improvement help retention and growth, but it's going to help us defend against the competition. Tim, I'd love to just hear from you as you think about, I know you've got a BD team, West Monroe obviously also has an entire account management team. When you think about the growth expectations that the business has, have you seen it work well? And then perhaps in other scenarios, seen where the service mentality prevents you from hitting those numbers?
Yeah, being a consultant at heart too, this one, hurts a little bit to admit, but you won't be there without the good service, right? Without that delivery excellence, we'll never get the chance to have the second conversation. So I think it's kind of a 1-2 punch, but it was an education to me to understand the relative impact, that improvement. And so I've been here 6 years. I'd say in the last 10 years of our 20-year history, our executive team, our marketing leadership, our commercial leadership has really helped evolve our firm to be focused on that customer improvement. And it also hits on the account planning teams and the account management teams taking that risk you talked about, Kate, right? Some risks are worth taking and poking them with these, looking around the corner for them. Are you aware of this? Here's improvements we're seeing in your sector. It applies as much to managing and growing the account as it does to the new sale, as you said. So definitely seen it.
Yeah, and I know we're just up on time. Just to wrap a bow on this, I know we all talked to the team earlier, and we are all not in the business of making happy customers. We're in the business of making successful customers, right? And how do we do that? We've got to really focus on how do we improve their business? What can we do from our viewpoint and the purview that we have to do that effectively?
Yeah, so as we're moving on, we just wanted to make sure, we summarize that we shared a lot of information here. Obviously, like you will get these slides. I know we started to get a little close on time, but I just wanted to sort of give you at a high level, how to recession-proof your playbook for your organization. So, really thinking about your upskilling, thinking about focusing on, the smaller deals that make sense or the right deals, really thinking about your sales cycle. Once again, if there's longer time to close, really thinking about your mobilizers, who are going to help you, thinking about running the existing relationships. How do you continue to, as Kate said, make sure you have successful customers, not happy customers. So once again, this is all will be shared with you. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A. So I know we only have about 3 minutes, but if there are some questions, I do see a few in the Q&A. So thanks for sharing. So the first one comes from Rory. And when delivering a reframe to a mobilizer, is it hard to judge when to pull together the discussion to your solution? Is there a guide as to what verifying steps or level of construction tension are needed before we get into our solution product?
Yeah, I can take that. I love that question, Rory. I mean, the big kind of checkpoint that I would ask ourselves and as a seller is, if we deliver the reframe, has the customer recognized the problem and how big the problem is, and that it's worth solving? If they haven't recognized that yet, then there's not a point to then bring together a group to talk about the solution. We've got to get them to first recognize that this is a problem worth solving and a problem worth solving now. So that's what I would say, just to make sure that's kind of one verifying step. Obviously, making sure that you have the mobilizer is a verifying step, someone that shows healthy skepticism, someone that's open to new ideas, someone that has the influence to not just say they're going to bring the group together, but actually brings the group together. So that would be another kind of verifier that we've got the right person.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, Nicole, you have some questions as well. I know we're short on time, but we can try to get to one of them. Should a company's marketing materials pitch the status quo reframe, or is the reframe solely part of the sales process? I'll start with that, and Tim and Kate, feel free to jump in. It definitely has to be an aligned effort. Actually, not to pitch our webinar for next month, but that's all around sales and marketing alignment. So it's really important that your marketing materials also talk about that reframe, because if they're seeing something that's more status quo in your marketing messaging, you want to make sure that it is all aligned. Certainly.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think of it as like the teaser trailer for the movie, right? So the marketing should kind of tease them to want to learn more and actually have that meeting with you, right? So agreed.
Yeah, and this is the topic near and dear to my heart. I want to emphasize what Tim mentioned, which is where your customers are learning. First, we need to know what that is and where that is. We should absolutely be priming their thinking for what will ultimately become a sales interaction. But the other just very tactical topic I want to mention is oftentimes we work with salespeople where having this insight-led reframe conversation isn't natural to them. So if the pitch deck we're arming them with is all about us and our product, that's where they're going to default to. So we've got to make sure that the content that we're equipping them with is also insight-led, also focuses on the reframe to give them the confidence to have that conversation until they've had a few more at-bats.
Yeah, absolutely. So really quickly, we have some upcoming, like I said, we have an upcoming webinar around sales alignment. We will have the CMO of HighSpot joining us for that. If we can just move to the next slide, Bree. So we do have that. Also, we have our Winning the Challenger Sale podcast. Tim will be joining me in February, but right now live, we have Rebecca Grimes, who's the CRO of Ruby, and Paul Stancic, who is a partner at Parker Gale. So some really great podcasts coming up. Those are also terrific ways to get this content. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will be sending out the deck. If there's any questions, you can reach out to us directly. Thank you, Tim and Kate. This was an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you making the time.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.